I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.
Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about 5 secret notions that will transform your knit sewing projects. So we're going to cover specialty tools that professionals use, how these notions solve common knit sewing problems, and specific techniques for using them in fitted garments like our new Citron dress pattern. All right, Haley, here is our icebreaker for today. What's your favorite knit garment you've ever made, and what made you love it?
I have so many knit garments I love because I have a lot of workhorse knitwear that I wear a lot. But the one that comes to mind, because I've been thinking about it lately, is this bodycon dress that I made, I want to say probably close to 10 years ago. And I knocked off my favorite t-shirt pattern, and then I self-drafted the bottom half. And it was like really fitted in all the right places and slightly less fitted and all the places that made me feel a little more comfortable in it. And it was perfect. And I was thinking recently when I tried on one of the Citron samples how I wanted to use some of my findings from that dress to customize my Citron. But it wasn't out of special fabric or anything. I just took the time to get the perfect fit on it, and I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's so nice when you get that ideal fit that just makes you comfy, but still. I like a bodycon dress because it's so layerable, especially in summer. When I travel, I love wearing them because you can just throw like a linen shirt over it or whatever. It's just, they're very versatile.
Yeah. I think that I actually made it for a trip originally. And then I just like wore it into the ground.
Yeah. I have something in my closet like that I always take when I travel, and it's so useful in my closet. I think my favorite knit garment, the one that comes to mind right now, maybe because it's more recent, is the pepper sweater that I made over the winter. So if you've seen my YouTube video about all the things that I sewed in winter, you've already seen it, but it is a red, like a kind of a bright cherry red cashmere sweater. So I bought this cashmere sweater knit on Etsy, and it is just so special. I love it. It's really cozy. It's cute. I wore it a lot in the winter. And I think because the fabric is something that's a little bit special, was a little bit more expensive, a little bit more of a investment, I just feel, I don't know, more connected to it. I feel like it's something I really took my time with and made something that was just for me, that felt luxurious and special. So that's my favorite right now.
It's a stunner. I love that one.
It's lovely, and it's comfortable to wear too, which is important for me these days. All right. Well, give us your icebreaker for a future episode. So if you have a question for us, you can leave it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll answer it in a future episode. We'd love to hear from you guys. All right, let's get into our topic for today. So have you ever sewn a knit garment that looked just a little bit kind of wonky? I definitely have. Maybe the seams are wavy, or the edge is flipped out, or the hem's puckered in all the wrong places. It's just so frustrating to put all that work into something and then have these little details just sabotage how you feel about it. So a few weeks ago, Haley and I were discussing our favorite notions for sewing with knits, and specifically for bodycon styles, and we realized that there are some real game changers that don't get nearly enough attention. So we all know about ballpoint needles and walking feet, and those are definitely important, but today we're going to share 5 specialty notions that can completely transform your knit sewing. So these are the secret weapons I personally reach for when working on fitted styles like our new Citron dress pattern. And they make all the difference between something you're excited to wear and something that feels maybe a bit off or just doesn't last as long. I also have a video coming out this week on our YouTube channel that shows many of these notions in action. So definitely check that out at Seamwork Video on YouTube if you want to see these techniques demonstrated. So, Haley, what's your biggest frustration when sewing with knits?
I think when I first started sewing with knits, my biggest frustration was the variation between different types of knits. I think that in my mind, I wanted to treat them all similarly, but that would be like treating all woven fabrics similarly. You wouldn't treat chiffon the same way you would treat canvas.
Yeah.
And I think that the knit category gets kind of like glossed over in that way. you have to be really strategic and you have to really understand the qualities of the fabric, just like with woven fabric. And once I started learning about specialty notions and different techniques, I feel like I overcame this a lot. And also the power of testing
Yeah.
your fabric. It really helped me here too. What about you? What's your biggest frustration?
I think it's related, but what you just said it really resonated with me because I've been thinking about this as we make a lot of videos for our YouTube channel on different fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right that a lot of people kind of lump all knit fabrics together. And there are definitely techniques and notions that apply to all knit fabrics. But as we make videos on things like how to sew with rib knits, for example, or how to sew with sweater knits, there are a lot of little tips and tricks that you can use to make your garment just a lot easier to sew. And I think that's a big thing that we're trying to convey to people through the podcast, through the YouTube channel, all of that stuff, is that there are things you can do that will make your projects easier on you.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal, is just to make things as easy as possible. They don't have to be hard. So anyway, for me, I think it's fitting because of what you said, because every fabric behaves differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to woven fabrics, I think there's less range in how the fabric is going to affect the fit.
Yeah.
It definitely does. Obviously different woven fabrics have a different effect, but with knit fabric, it has a much higher variability. The fabric itself affects the fit a lot more. And because of that, it's hard to test things out because you kind of have to use the same fabric to test out the fit, which means buying twice as much fabric if you want to do that. You could use a different fabric, but then you don't know if the fit's going to be exactly the same. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges with knit fabrics.
Yeah, I agree. We run into this a lot in the development process too when we're working with knits, is we tend to have to test things in multiple different types of knits and kind of like create a balanced approach when it comes to the fit so that it will work in a rib knit and a jersey and something that's a little firmer and something that's a little bit more loose. And obviously we can't accommodate all fabrics with one garment, but it's definitely more of a challenge with our knit garments than it is with woven garments.
Yeah, absolutely.
What qualities do you look for when you're making a fitted knit garment?
For fitted knits, so one of the things that I think is really important is recovery. That's probably the biggest thing. The other thing is the weight of the fabric. I think a lightweight knit in a more bodycon style is kind of hard to pull off.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Some fabrics are naturally more drapey. So if you have like a rayon knit, for example, that's going to be naturally more drapey. So I suppose body is another thing that I look for. Something that's a little bit more heavy, a little bit more, it's going to hold its shape really well. What about you?
I would say recovery, like stretch percentage and recovery with knit garments. If you want to get a more consistent fit with what it was drafted for, you really need to make sure that the stretch percentage is at the very least what the pattern is recommending. But yeah, also body, because, and this is more of a preference thing for me. I don't want there's a difference between fitted and clingy.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I'm not often going for the clingy look. That can be like lovely and an effect for different kinds of garments. But for fitted knit garments, I want it to be like a little bit more of a firm body to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I think those terms are helpful when thinking about kind of the final look and visualizing what it's going to look like on your body, whether you want a more fitted look, a little bit more tailored looking, or you want something that looks a little bit more flowy and clingy.
Yeah. Have you found that certain types of knit projects benefit more from some of the specialty notions we're going to talk about today than others?
I think some of those lighter weight knits do tend to benefit from some of them. We're going to talk about some notions that help you with stabilizing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that can be challenging with knits, is not having enough stability. So I think those types definitely benefit more. And then we're going to talk about some types of elastic, which I think that pretty much is something that applies to a lot of a bigger range of knit fabrics as well.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I also think some of the specialty notions apply also for any specialty kind of knits. So when you're looking outside of like jerseys and pontees and French terries into like the more niche things, I feel like the more nicher notions also need to get.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, let's get into the notions.
Okay, so number 1 on our list is plush back elastic. So this is one of my absolute favorites for any project where the elastic might touch your skin. So if you've ever worn a bra that left like red marks on your shoulders, you know how uncomfortable regular elastic can be when it's worn right up against your body. Plush back elastic has a soft kind of velvety side that sits against your skin, while the other side is smooth and that attaches to your fabric. It's perfect for shelf bras like the one in the Citron dress because it stays in place without digging in and binding and being really uncomfortable. To use it correctly, you want to make sure that the soft, plushy side is positioned right up against your skin. So what I do is I pin it in place first with the right sides together. Then I sew with a zigzag stitch and I stretch it slightly as I go. And then I flip the elastic to the inside and I top stitch, usually using a 3-step zigzag stitch. And that's how I apply my plush back elastic. Sarai, are there some projects that you've used this notion for?
Yeah, I've used it for shelf bras and for kind of workout wear. I made a workout top many years ago. I was running a half marathon and I made this really cute workout top with a built-in shelf bra. It was in this, I think that I got the fabric from Spoonflower and it had like kittens all over it or something. It was very silly. But it had a shelf bra. And so I used plush back elastic there. I've also made bras. So I use them for the bra straps in that case. That actually brings me to a question, which is, are there differences in the types of plush back elastic? Because when it comes to bra straps, that tends to be very firm elastic. Whereas some of the wider elastics that you use, like maybe at the bottom of a shelf bra, tend to be maybe a little bit less firm. What do you think?
Yeah, so there are specific elastics that are for straps specifically, and usually it'll be labeled like for bra straps. And that tends to have a little bit of give, but not too much. And then we have our plush back elastic. Lots of times it'll be a picot edge plush back elastic, and that just means it has that little scalloped decorative edge on it. That's what's often used for things like bras or lingerie. They also make that same quality without the decorative edge. But aside from like the different types, there's also different quality of plush back elastic. And so for that reason, I really try to buy from either in person or from a trusted source. So Bra Maker Supply.
I love that place.
I have never bought like a bad notion from there. And if I can't buy from there, I do try and buy locally when I can, because sometimes it can just be, the recovery cannot be that great. When you stretch it out, it can actually feel a little rough to your hands. So I definitely look out for quality as well with this notion.
Yeah, definitely. I've bought all kinds of range of quality when it comes to elastic. But I wanted to ask that because I think often when you think of plush back elastic, you think of bra straps. And that does tend to be very, very firm as far as elastic goes and not quite as stretchy. So it's good for people to know that. All right, well, let's talk about the next notion, which is one of my favorites, woolly nylon thread. So woolly nylon thread is probably my number one game changer for sewing knits. It's this specialty thread that's fuzzy, it's stretchy, and it's practically invisible when you use it in the bobbin for top stitching or when you use it in your sergers. And I'll talk a little bit about how you do that. So the first time I used woolly nylon in my serger was for a black bodycon dress that I was making. And I'd always worried about thread popping when sewing something that's really stretchy and really fitted. But with woolly nylon thread, that's not an issue because the thread stretches with the fabric instead of breaking or creating tension. So one of the issues you might encounter, and one of the reasons that seams might pop is that the thread just doesn't stretch as much as the fabric does. So you're kind of not matching the stretchiness of the fabric to the stretchiness of the thread. So woolly nylon helps you with that because the thread actually stretches. And it's also super soft against the skin, which is perfect for those form-fitting garments because nobody likes super scratchy thread against their skin, especially when it's something that's fitted and really close to your skin and kind of rubbing. So for the Citron dress, I especially recommend using woolly nylon when serging the shelf bra seams, when you're hemming the neckline and the armholes, and when you're securing the elastics. Those are all the places where you need a lot of stretch, and it's also up against your skin. So to use it, you can just wind it onto your bobbin. So you want to wind it loosely because it works best when it's not too tight. And then you use regular thread in your needle. So you only need to use it in the bobbin. And if you're using a serger, woolly nylon works beautifully in all the loopers, so it creates seams that stretch without popping. And you just need to remember to loosen your tension a little bit when you use it in your loopers. So yeah, have you ever had a seam pop? And don't you just feel worse when it's on something that you've made versus something that you've bought? I know you've talked about seam popping before.
Yeah,
Haley.
because it's like my fault when I made it. When it's something I bought, I'm like, yeah, that's what I get. That's what I get for not making this.
So true.
Yeah, I'm not hard on myself or anything. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is Wonder Tape, which I'm very enthusiastic about. Wonder Tape is kind of like having an extra pair of hands when you're sewing knits, really an extra pair of hands when you're sewing anything. It's a double-sided water-soluble tape that holds fabric in place without any pins. So you might think, well, can't I just use pins? But pins actually create little bumps in your fabric, especially if you're sewing over them, which I don't recommend, but it happens. Plus, the fabric between the pins can still stretch while you're sewing, which is what leads to sometimes wavy-looking seams. I use Wonder Tape in 3 key places when I'm sewing projects like the Citron dress. First, in hems, applying the tape along the folded hem, then press it in place and stitch. The tape is going to hold everything perfectly flat and prevent things from stretching. Necklines is another great place to use it. Before applying any bindings or facings, run a strip along the edge to prevent any stretching. And then also our straps. When attaching the straps, Wonder Tape keeps them perfectly positioned without all of the hassle of pins. The best part is that it comes completely out with just a little bit of water when you wash your garments, and there's no residue. I've never had an issue with residue when I've used it, and I have used it a lot. Mm-hmm. If you're working with a fabric that can't be washed immediately, or it's like a dry clean only situation, you can dab it with a damp cloth to dissolve the tape. I like to think of it kind of like training wheels for challenging fabric. It's there when you need it for support, and then, it washes away, and it's gone when you don't need it. Sarai, what's your favorite use for Wonder Tape?
I use Wonder Tape all the time. Mm-hmm. I love it. And Wonder Tape is the brand name, I think,
it
right?
Is.
For the one Clover makes. Uh-huh. But there are other washable tapes that you can use. Wawak makes one, which is very affordable. So we can put a link to that in the show notes as well, and to Wawak. Yeah. And that's one that I use a lot. So I use it a lot, but I think my favorite is actually for knit hems. I pretty much always use it when I'm sewing a knit hem because that's a place where things can get very wavy and stretched out, and it's very obvious when that does happen. So that's the place I use it the most. Plus, it holds it in place really, really well.
Yeah.
What about you?
Knit hems are great. I love it for zippers.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of semi-unrelated to knits. You can have a zipper in knitwear too, but that's where I fell in love with it. And since then, I've found so many countless ways to use it. It's like a must in my sewing room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We use it in the Invisible Zipper Skills Workshop, and we also did a YouTube video about sewing invisible zippers that we mentioned it too. All right. The next one I want to talk about is fusible knit interfacing. So regular interfacing and knit fabrics just don't play that well together. It's kind of like wearing a rigid corset under a comfy, stretchy dress. It just sort of defeats the purpose. So fusible knit interfacing is specifically designed to add stability while preserving stretch. So I found that strategic interfacing can really transform how your knit garment looks. And the key word is strategic. You don't need to interface entire pattern pieces. You just need to interface the areas that need extra support. So, for example, for the Citron dress, I recommend using thin strips of fusible knit interfacing in a few key areas. So, for example, along the slit edge before hemming is a good place to use it. At the strap attachment points, just to add a little bit more security and stability there. And along the upper edge of the shelf bra. Those are all great places to use it. So that's kind of how you might use some strips of knit interfacing. And your pattern might not necessarily tell you to do that. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. These are kind of things that you can add in yourself in areas that you know need either a little bit more stability or a little bit more strength. Because with knit fabrics, I'm sure we've all had knit garments that, let's say you have a strap on a knit garment and it's just getting really, really stretched over time and you can see the stitches and they seem like they might pop, that kind of thing. Adding a little bit of interfacing in that area is just going to add a little bit more strength there. You can also use wider pieces to add structure to areas like the upper back where bodycon styles can sometimes sag with wear, so it can just add a little bit more stability there. If you can't find dedicated knit interfacing, power mesh or stretch mesh are really good alternatives. So those provide stability while still allowing for four-way stretch. So you simply cut a piece to size and baste it between your fabric layers before constructing the seam. And you can think of that as kind of shapewear for your garment. It smooths and it supports without restricting. So Haley, do you ever use interfacing in kind of unexpected ways for knit garments or maybe ways that your pattern doesn't tell you about?
Where I use it most consistently with knitwear, as I use it a lot of times at the shoulder seam. Oftentimes, pattern instructions will recommend knit stay tape, which is just strips of knit interfacing, or clear elastic. I personally usually just cut a little strip
Me too.
of knit interfacing and use it there. The other place I like to use it is when a knit garment is finished with a facing along the neckline or it has a lining, like in our bobby dress. Citron is kind of this way because it has the shelf bra. That's what finishes the neckline. I almost always do a little strip along the edge just to keep things from stretching out, especially usually the stretchiest part of a knit fabric is the cross grain of it. So anything that runs along that cross grain or kind of like the bias can really stretch out. So knit interfacing can go a long way there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another place that I use it sometimes is actually in hems if I want them to have a little bit more body to them. So, for example, I recently sewed our Farrah, which is a ballet wrap cardigan, and it came out so cute. But the fabric is like a soft sweater knit, so it was very drapey.
Yeah.
But I did the version that has bell sleeves, a little bit more of a bell sleeve. And so I wanted the bell sleeve not to just collapse. I wanted it to have a little bit more structure to it. So I added a strip of knit interfacing around the cuff, and then I added it to the hem just to give it a little bit more structure. And that worked really, really well.
Oh, I bet that really elevated the whole look.
Yeah, it's a design detail. So it's something that you can add kind of depending on the look that you're going for. It's not necessarily just about the function and stability. It's also can change the look, and depending on what you want, you can manipulate it that way.
Well, that's a great tip. Okay. Our last notion we're going to talk about is fold over elastic, which is also referred to as FOE. And it might be one of the most versatile notions on our list. It's a pre-folded elastic that has a center crease that allows you to encase raw edges in one kind of simple step. I first discovered it while making activewear, but quickly realized it's really perfect for any knit edge that needs a clean finish without the bulk. It comes in a bunch of different colors and even fun prints like polka dots and stripes. And it allows you to really add a lot of personality to your garments. For the Citron dress, fold-over elastic can be a fantastic alternative to the traditional hemming. Since bodycon styles really hug your curves, bulky hems can create unwanted lines or indentations. Fold-over elastic creates a really smooth, low-profile finish. So here's kind of my quick method for applying it. First, you're going to cut the elastic to match your edge length. No need to stretch here. Align the edge of your fabric with the middle line of the elastic, then use a zigzag stitch to baste along the innermost edge of the elastic. Trim any of the excess fabric away, and then fold the elastic along the fold line and top stitch with another zigzag stitch. For visible edges like necklines or armholes, I love using contrasting fold-over elastic as a design feature. For the Citron dress, you could use a black elastic on a really brightly colored fabric to create a really sporty, more modern look. And it's kind of like getting the perfect bias finish, but without all of the hassle of cutting and pressing bias strips, which is just so simple to use. Sarai, do you have have you ever used fold-over elastic in a contrasting color as a design element?
Yeah, I have. I haven't used it in quite a while, but I remember I made a pair of cute little kind of knit, almost like boxer shorts with fold-over elastic in black, and I think the boxer shorts are like a pinkish color. That's really cute and very easy to apply. It's like a really easy finish to do, and I like that you can use it both for things like waistlines and things like that, but you can also use it, like you said, as almost like a bias finish to any edge that you want on a knit garment.
Oh, I like this idea of like a little like loungewear boxer moment with fold-over elastic. That sounds cute.
Yeah. Very cute. That was a fun thing to make because it was really easy and fast. And fold-over elastic makes it really, really fast to sew. All right, so we've covered 5 fantastic notions that can really elevate your knit sewing. First, plush back elastic for comfortable, professional-looking elastic finishes. Second, woolly nylon thread for stretchy, durable seams that won't pop. Third, wonder tape for stabilizing hems and edges without pins. Fourth, fusible knit interfacing for strategic support that moves with your fabric. And finally, fold-over elastic for clean and professional edge finishes. So what's your big takeaway from today's episode, Haley?
I think that my big takeaway is how considering strategy when you're sewing anything, but particularly when you're sewing knitwear, is one of the first things you should do when you're working on a project and probably the most important thing you can do. There's nothing that really replaces doing some tests on your fashion fabric and then considering some of the like downfalls of your fabric and challenges that it might come with, and then coming up with ways to solve those. I think that once you take that approach with your knitwear, you'll really find that it'll level up and look a lot more professional.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I have a pretty simple takeaway, which is I would like to experiment more with, especially elastic. Some of these notions we talked about are things that I use every day. And then some of the others, like the elastic, are things that are really helpful when you need them, but they can also be used as kind of design features and things you can kind of plan your sewing around. So I think it would be really fun to do that and think about how you could use something like fold-over elastic to create a really simple project that's easy to sew. And I like to have those, palette cleansers in my sewing queue. So I just want to think about that a little bit more and how to use these notions to make some simple, easy projects that I know I'm gonna like. All right, well, we've talked a lot today about notions that work beautifully for fitted knit garments. And if you want to put these new techniques into practice right away, I'd like to introduce you to our newest pattern, which is the Citron dress. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. Citron is a beautiful knit bodycon dress that has a fitted silhouette throughout and a flattering midi length. So it features a softly scooped neckline and wide set 1-inch straps that create a really elegant frame for your shoulders. What makes Citron special is the built-in shelf bra, which you can sew with or without foam cups depending on your preference. And this is where that plush back elastic we talked about really shines. So the dress also has a center back seam for a perfect fit and a single side slit that adds both style and ease of movement. It's finished with a simple 5/8 inch single fold hem that's perfect practicing those wonder tape techniques that we discussed. So if you want to make your own Citron and try out some of these techniques, I recommend a medium weight knit with at least 40% stretch and good recovery. So cotton spandex blends, ponte, or stable double knits all work really, really beautifully. Members can download the Citron pattern today at seamwork.com. And if you're not a member yet, now is a great time to join so you can get immediate access to this pattern and our entire library of over 250 patterns. And if you like today's episode, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review. We love reading your 5-star reviews. And if you have a question for us for an icebreaker, you can leave it there as well. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. And again, we've got a video going up, I think it went up last week, that is all about these knit notions and some tips for sewing with knit. So really, really helpful. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join. And that's it for us this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.
Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.